are getting the next panel session ready, may I first introduce our moderator of the next panel. He is from Equinix, and I think we've talked about this already, so we've heard the name. This is going to be interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Christophe Thioux, the Senior Director of Corporate Sales EMEA at Equinix. Here we go. Yeah, you get that one? Great.
This one works.
Okay, I'm just going to set these here. And yeah, that one goes there. Right. So, how are you feeling? Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Edifying so far. And right, we are going to try to make sure that everybody can hear each other.
Yeah,
well.
that'll be great.
Feel free to bunch it on in. That's no problem. And yeah, I will introduce your next panel. Let us have Peter van Burgel. Peter van Burgel, the CEO at AMS-IX. Yes, Peter is here. Yes, applause. Here he comes. We got. Oh, I think a different order as well. Let me put it in the order of on the screen. We've got Mark Cooper, who is a last-minute addition, the Director of Connectivity, Director of Connectivity at Interxion. Yes, Mark is here. Thank you very much. For the record, Mark is filling in for Caroline because, yeah, they wanted one female on the panel, but unfortunately she fell ill. So, Mark, yes, you're representing the patriarchy here today. Okay, also, we got Peter up on stage. Let's get Frans as well. Frans, CEO at Quanza. Yes, Frans is here with the microphone. Well done. And we've got one more, and that is Stephen Bryan. Stephen Bryan here from Amazon Web Services, and you are in position as well. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. Here we are, the panel, and yes, please make them feel welcome.
Thank you.
Take it away. Yeah.
I'll do my best.
All right.
Thank you for coming. I'd like to follow up on the presentation from René, and you're all coming from different horizons in the world. I'd like to understand which trends, one or two, are impacting you the most. And maybe Frans, as first.
Thank you. What we're seeing is more and more cloud adoption by traditional hosters and traditional system integrators who are really transforming their operation to embrace cloud native setups, training their staff to not just host their own infrastructure in their own data center, but yeah, build a hybrid environment where they both earn money on their own infrastructure, but also earn on the services that they provision based on public cloud infrastructures.
Okay, maybe Mark?
Yeah, I think there's two perspectives. One is what the platforms themselves are doing, and then there's what the consumers of the cloud are doing. If you look at the platforms, AWS is a great example. If you do Outpost, Wavelengths, where the platforms are actually going deeper, so they're not just staying in the traditional hyperscale locations or the co-location providers, they're actually going deeper. And then on the other side, a lot of enterprises are actually struggling with the migration to cloud. Everyone thinks cloud networking is simple. Well, it's not. It might be easy to spin up a cross-connect or a layer 2 connection, but the configuration in the cloud is something that they're struggling with, and that's where you see programs from the cloud providers to work more with the integrators to fix those problems.
Thank you. Mark, maybe?
Stephen.
So how those trends are kind of transforming your life, because you're a cloud provider.
Yeah, so one of the things that really resonated with me, excuse me, in the deck was, well, a lot of it spoke about public cloud providers, so there was a lot of positives about the growth we're seeing. But one of the things that really resonated with me was the move to these more advanced analytics and machine learning. And we're in a very customer-driven world, specifically, in the public cloud, we're almost at, further down the life cycle than maybe a lot of the data center providers that are here in the room today. And we're seeing more and more customers worry more about how they can solve their business problems with these more platform-level technologies, such as managed artificial intelligence or machine learning services, data analytics services, Internet of Things. So that really resonated with me. What we're seeing with our customers is them moving, higher up the stack and trying to focus on business outcomes rather than technology.
Okay, cool. Peter, maybe?
I agree with all of them.
Okay.
No,
That's it.
yeah. I think additionally what we see is this element of hyperconnectivity. So where all these developments are happening, we see that many enterprises, but even also some of the service providers, are struggling to actually get all that connectivity working well. And it's almost like an application-driven type of connectivity that is required these days to serve these specific applications. So we see on the one hand, a lot of commoditization and consolidation, but on the other hand, actually a lot of challenges to get the connectivity organized well.
Cool. As the journey to the cloud is continuing and going deeper, we need more speed, we need more flexibility, we need to be at the edge and eventually the micro edge. So I'd like to hear from you, how does it translate to your move to that journey? So how do you help enterprises and business moving there?
I can touch on what we're doing at Amazon in that space. I think if you look at, and Mark touched on some of the announcements that we made actually just in December, there's a few things we're working on at Amazon to get closer to the edge when we're for our customers. First thing is a product called Outpost, which actually allows you to extend the kind of equivalent of a small AWS footprint in your on-premises or your co-location data center. So that gives you that some of those latency-sensitive applications can get the benefit of the same APIs and the same interfaces that the developers are used to working with, but in your co-located data center. Another thing we've done is with the emergence of 5G, is we've announced a project which we're starting this year called AWS Wavelength. And what Wavelength will do will actually put AWS technology in the telco provider, the 5G telco providers' data centers as close to the edge of the 5G network as possible. So as you look at the advancement of 5G and things like augmented reality and virtual reality technologies, having that single-digit millisecond latency to the mobile device itself for those 5G use cases is going to be really powerful for some of the some really kind of exciting use cases in things like healthcare and other industries as well. So we're seeing that trend, and we're working to get closer to customers from a network perspective.
So Mark, how does that translate in terms of data center world and interconnections, that kind of things? So what kind of stress does this put us?
I think what we see, so yeah, they're going deeper in terms of where they're deploying their infrastructure, but a lot of the connectivity still sits in the traditional locations. So it's how do you then extend that connectivity to these edge data centers? And edge is my favorite term because it's a term that means nothing at the moment, because it means everything differently to different people. So I think there's still very much a role for things like AWS Direct Connect, Azure Express Route, so where the enterprises can do their private connectivity, but it's that, but it's also how do they integrate the SD-WAN, how do they do multi-cloud? And I think that's a trend that you're starting to see now. Is in the beginning there were some very specific multi-cloud cases, but now it's becoming more common. And how do you do that? How do you interconnect them? Do you do that on-prem? Do you do that in the cloud? Do you do it in a data center? And I think that's where the enterprises are really struggling, and that's where they're looking for direction and support.
We see more and more data centers entering the world of SDN and other services, X as a service, whatever it will be. From Frans, in your opinion, what kind of change does that bring to your, let's say, world?
It brings us a lot of choice. At first, for example, looking at AMS-IX, it was a platform to connect service providers, but now you can also connect to the clouds through the AMS-IX, so it's also an enterprise connectivity platform. If you look at data center connectivity platforms like Equinix's, for example, at first they were an enterprise connectivity platform to the cloud, and now you're seeing that you're also introducing provider interconnection services. So we as an integrator offering managed services and integration services on all those platforms, we have a lot of choice, and we can pick and choose and match everything that we want from a lot of different parties, and looking at, well, whatever the business requirements are.
Okay. And from an AMS-IX perspective,
yeah, word I learned last year was co-opetition, and I think that's what we're seeing a lot. So we, as Frans was already alluding to, we have, for a long time, we're working with just the service providers and the data centers, but we see quite the influx from enterprises coming to us as well, asking for that help. How do we migrate? And we are trying to figure out, do we do that ourselves? Do we work with the data centers? Do we work with the service providers? Or do we build a service that we sell through some of our partners? but we clearly see these challenges where actually quite a few enterprises are trying to get onto the internet even natively. So they're starting to have their own ASs and things like that, and asking for help how to work with that. So yeah, it's an interesting market where there's a lot of fluidity, a lot of new players coming into each other's markets, and if anything, it's giving indeed a lot of choice to both the customers, but also to us as service providers.
So I have a question about what is your impact on the future trends actually? So the business is driving it for sure, but you guys are developing technology, services that will, and connectivities that will help, help the enterprise. So what kind of trend are you guys kind of foreseeing in the future that maybe René has missed?
I could touch on one that René touched on very briefly, was in his third wave of development. So he was kind of saying we're not quite there yet. But I think to kind of set this up, I think what we're seeing is customers are, and specifically enterprise customers, are needing to be much more competitive with their leaner startup equivalents, and they need to move fast and have technology at their fingertips to be able to do that. And if they do things in the same old way they always have done, then they're going to be left behind and they'll be, taken over. We've seen many industries be disrupted. Airbnb in the hotel industry, people like Hotels.com and Expedia online, hotel book in that industry as well. There's plenty of innovation in that space, which is across all industries where we see startups kind of eating their larger competitors. Banking is another one. So because of that, companies are looking at how can they innovate faster. So I mentioned earlier about using kind of platform level services and not really worrying about the technology under the hood. So one of the things I'm seeing as a major trend is serverless computing. And René touched on it as a future trend, but serverless computing is a bit of a silly name because it's still servers somewhere. But the serverless computing is enabling people to innovate faster and only really pay for the resources they need. And we call it serverless computing, but we mean much more than that. It's not just about compute, it's about serverless databases, being able to pay for resources on demand. And this is what's enabling people to lean in and experiment and fail fast without that cost of that upfront investment that they maybe had in the traditional world.
So that type of services are changing the world for us. So in terms of data center, maybe how do you think we should respond to that trend now? So what's next? Do we have like any strategic plan to share, maybe Mark? Or
I think so far we've talked a lot about enterprise, but there's another thing that's driving a lot of these requirements as well, and that's the delivery of content. So yeah, we're so used to having Netflix, it works seamlessly whether you're on your phone or you're at home. But kind of the next wave, so cloud gaming, so where you don't have your expensive gaming PC, you don't even have a console at home anymore. You have things like Google Stadia. So I think the content is probably going to be the one that drives things before the enterprise requirements do. I think with the enterprise at the moment, they may be experimenting, but there's not any real hard cases for using edge compute right now. It's very much content driven.
One thing that I've seen in René's presentation, which I found very interesting, well, Stephen, you're completely right that things are driven more and more towards platform. The total addressable market for infrastructure as a service is still growing very rapidly, and even the on-prem part, or the private part, if you wish, is also growing. So I think that there will be an intermediate wave as well, where either enterprises or content providers, whoever, will still be installing more and more into infrastructure as a service environments as well. At least if you look at René's number, that's a point which I found very, surprising.
Yeah, just to touch on that from our perspective, I think that resonates also with a lot of our customers, because that migration journey to get to wave 3 is sometimes significant, for depending on where you are, where your starting point is, and where you are in your maturity journey. So, but many customers, and if you're not familiar with the public cloud platforms, there's a lot of data center providers here today. I'd say you need to think of the cloud as much more than just infrastructure as a service. And whilst that's still a huge part of what we do and a huge part of where our customers are in their journey, if you're looking forward, don't think that the cloud is just somewhere you can lift and shift your virtual machines to. There's much more capability that you can get from it. And that's where we can partner with data center providers as well. If you look at people like Rackspace, who we've done a global partnership with, they've almost read René's playbook about moving into cloud consulting and focusing on helping people migrate and moving away, still have some of their own capabilities as well. So we can partner to help with people like yourselves to help people through those journeys.
Yeah, and maybe to add, again, looking at the slides, I'm trying to look at this almost in two speeds or two types of pace, because all those graphs were talking about rapid growth of X as a service. However, the majority of the bar was still in traditional. Of course, the growth is spectacular because you're eating into the traditional market, but as said, there's still a huge amount of transformation that needs to happen. So as enterprises or organizations jump on this digital transformation bandwagon, there's still a huge amount of work for us to do to help these customers migrate. But the second pace, of course, is that we need to look forward as far as we can and develop services, develop infrastructure to actually support that growth as well. So it is a balancing act in serving the requirement as we see today, while we prepare for some of the services that we see emerging very rapidly.
Okay. We have seen ecosystems of industries growing rapidly. What's the challenge now to have those ecosystems growing within your data centers and using hybrid multi-cloud at the same time? So what will be, Mark, maybe your challenge, if you see any?
Not working. Right. Okay. I think the big challenge is keeping up with the demand and seeing where the demand is going to come from. So you see the growth from the hyperscalers themselves with the platforms they're deploying, but also what you might want to call next tier platforms that are coming along as well, and how they fit into that overall ecosystem. So it's a moving picture. It never stops. So I think it's very difficult to look in the future and go, it's going to be that, because if you asked us that last year, you'd get a different answer.
Yeah. We see Disney following on Netflix, so.
Yeah, maybe there's another, I think we're very much focused on the technology, which is very understandable given the audience and the people on stage, but I was in a meeting with a number of industry people, and actually one of the larger banks in the Netherlands, they're migrating a lot of their applications from offshoring back to the Netherlands. And the technology bit is challenging enough with data center space and power and what have you, but they mentioned two other things that were critical to them. One was that as they were moving stuff to Amsterdam, they couldn't only get the space for the data center, but they also couldn't get space for their people to live. So they were bringing in expats, and they just couldn't buy a house. So it was hard to bring that knowledge back as well. And thirdly, then also when they did manage to find a house, then for example the kids couldn't go to school because there's no facilities for. So the interesting thing is that as we're trying to solve these technology problems and figure out where we buy plots and the data centers can build and have the power, etc., there are some real life problems there as well, where the enterprises, but also I think that some of the hyperscalers are struggling to actually get the talent and actually be able to place them somewhere where they can sit close to the technology as well. So it's a bigger thing than just technology that is going to influence all of those trends in the coming years.
I think you're spot on, and my last question actually was, what is the physical challenge for the future? Because we'd like to help communities, business. We do have challenges, so.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest challenge that we see as customers take this journey is skills. We've spoke about this a lot. You just mentioned it as well in terms of what the root cause of that skill is. Maybe there's no housing available, but but I think more generally there's just a shortage of skills. René touched on the speed at which we've taken this journey towards cloud computing. So I think skills is a huge problem, and we're continuing to invest in our partners. We're continuing to grow our partner ecosystem and work with more companies like those that are here today to expand that capability. Because as you see, this cloud business is tip of the iceberg. The market opportunity is significant, and I think there's a huge opportunity for everyone here to really grab hold of it and just be customer focused in the way they deliver outcomes for their customers and continue to grow their businesses.
Go ahead.
Elaborate. We've seen that too, and it's great that AWS is also investing in skills. The local Dutch market has also come together out of the industry associations, the HBA and ISP Connect, and started the Cloud IT Academy, where we are educating students to bachelor level on cloud computing. So, yeah, there's a lot happening, fortunately.
I think there is a school named Codam that is preparing students to code, and I think they're dedicated to female students, so if you're looking for diversity.
That's one of the interesting things around the whole computer science space, just to touch on that. You spoke about bachelor degrees, but we're seeing now these coding boot camps where people can learn to code in 6, 9 months, sometimes even 12-week boot camps, and that's really accelerating the amount of kind of skills we have in the industry from a software development perspective, at least, you know, at the very top of the stack. But that just means more innovation and more capability for customers to do more. But they still need the people that can help do that kind of infrastructure operations and manage the cloud and the connectivity and the complex environments that our customers operate.
Good. I think we're good. Try to maintain it on time.
Is that right? Okay. Yeah. Well, then, yeah, I will take. Oh, wait a minute. Haha, I can do this. I can take microphone 4. Yeah, we are at this wonderful point where we were starting late, but now we're kind of caught up. If you have any questions for the panel or for Christophe, yeah, I can run a microphone to you myself, and if that's okay, yeah. Yeah, any questions? And I'll pop down here. Yeah, raise a hand. Here we go. Sorry, I'm going to squeeze through this way. Hi there. What's your name?
My name is Michael Ayot. I've got a question for all four. I mean, it is a great story you all told, but I didn't hear anything about security. So can you highlight that one?
Oh, I wondered if that would come up.
One of my areas of speciality, so I'm happy to talk about that. I think actually, when we talk about cloud, customers can improve their security posture in the cloud, and we're seeing customers do that already. So there's a lot of, we saw the stats, there's some fear and uncertainty around security in the cloud. But the reality is, when you go all in on a vendor like AWS, for example, you have much better visibility and tools that we provide to give you visibility around login and auditing and control of everything that's happening in your environment. That you can actually start to do security automation at scale, which allows you to unleash your development teams to innovate more. And actually, you're in a much more secure position in terms of doing proactive and reactive security monitoring than you maybe were across many heterogeneous, complex vendors on premises that maybe don't offer standard APIs that you can programmatically program across a single tool set. So the cloud is improving security posture for our customers. We actually had a bank on stage at our summit in Warsaw last year, Czech bank, Moneta Money Bank. This is great. They started their slide with a bank in the cloud, went through their story, and their last slide was a more secure bank in the cloud. So it's not just me saying this, our customers are seeing that in highly regulated industries are seeing that they can actually be more secure in the cloud because of the visibility and control that they get.
It is an awareness thing as well. It's great that you offer all the hooks and that you offer possibilities to secure environments, but it all starts with training and awareness as well. It's appalling how many people in companies are still clicking bad links and what have you without having any understanding. But it's great that you're feeding the infrastructure. Yeah.
I think as Steve said, it's likely that the level of security with a public cloud is going to be far higher than you could ever achieve with an enterprise. You can either start looking from physical upwards with the way the data centers are built, the control systems around it, or from the top of the software stack down. I think maybe the security issue is because these environments are so complex, and you have an enterprise that may be accessing it remotely, how do you actually maintain the security from where they're actually running the app or their users are to the public cloud?
Having some experience myself as well in the security market, many companies don't know how to secure well, or they maybe have a firewall as an antivirus and things like that. But if it's not configured well, maintained well, then it's a false sense of security. And I think as a cloud provider, you cannot afford to have a major breach or things like that. So time will tell, but I think indeed currently the cloud providers put more and the data centers put more investment into security than many of the enterprises can.
Hello?
Hello, yeah. We have excellent data infrastructure in the Netherlands, data communications. But how is the rest of Europe, in Germany and France and England, how is the fiber optic infrastructure? Is it a bottleneck for your operations? Are they lagging? Do they have to do something about that?
Well, I think if we look at that purely from connectivity, then I think yes, we are further than most other European countries here in the Netherlands, which is one, a benefit. It attracts, of course, not only the data centers but also a lot of the content. But the other part of that is that we also have a lot to lose. I think in the earlier slides we also saw the development of second-tier type cities and environments. And I think that's not just because of the available land and power, but also because in some parts of Europe there are significant investments into infrastructure, which on the one hand is of course is good for the total European community and the internet. But yeah, for the position here in Amsterdam, we need to keep a close eye on that because we're leading and we would like to remain that. So.
I think from our perspective as a major provider, a lot of people maybe don't know that this is an area we actually innovate in quite a lot at Amazon. Is we have some of the patents for the most dense subsea cables that conduits that you can provide. So we actually have a global private network to connect our facilities together. So we're also helping customers get the maximum connectivity they can between the regions which we operate, which is at the moment across Frankfurt, Stockholm, London and Dublin.
Right, so thank you all very much. And yes, I gave you your gift. There we go. We have gifts over here for you guys as well. So yes, good news. I think we have concluded this panel. Thank you very much to Christophe Thioux from Equinix, and thank you to these gentlemen as well. You're free to go.